Bueno, buenos días, buenas tardes, depende del país, a todas y a todos los que están conectados. Le damos la bienvenida al ciclo de webinar Perspectivas de Género en Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación. Es un ciclo que está siendo organizado en el marco de la agenda del PROCISUR. El PROCISUR, para quienes aún no nos conocen, es un programa cooperativo para el desarrollo tecnológico, agroalimentario y agroindustrial del Cono Sur, que fue creado en el año 80 con el apoyo del BID inicialmente, y es una iniciativa que integra todos los institutos nacionales de investigación agropecuaria del Cono Sur, Argentina, Brasil, Chile, Paraguay y Uruguay, y el Instituto Interamericano de Cooperación para la Agricultura, ICA. El programa, desde su creación hasta ahora, se ha ido adaptando y adecuando a la estrategia y los objetivos en función de los cambios que van ocurriendo a nivel global y regional en temas políticos, sociales, económicos, de ciencia y tecnología. Y hemos incorporado el tema de género y perspectiva de género. En el año 2021 la Comisión Directiva tomó la decisión, como consecuencia un poco de visibilizar que algunos indicadores sobre paridad de género en la región estaban alenteciéndose o incluso se habían detenido post pandemia, como efecto de la pandemia. Valorizamos también el hecho de que desde hace ya algunos años las instituciones miembros, tanto los CINIAS como el ICA, vienen realizando algunos esfuerzos para atender los temas de brechas de género en el ámbito laboral, también en el caso más del tema de mujer rural y las desigualdades que se han constatado y se constatan en el medio rural, y en mucho menor medida en el tema de el abordaje y la perspectiva de género en lo que es la ciencia y la tecnología, la planificación estratégica y los proyectos de investigación. Las instituciones vienen trabajando bastante o haciendo algunas iniciativas de visibilización, de transformación de marcos normativos, tanto de la organización como de los países, y también algunas estrategias de sensibilización y capacitación. Pero a pesar de esto, desde la región vimos que es un importante camino que se viene transitando, pero aún queda mucho para hacer, tanto por la igualdad de género efectiva, como por la eliminación de sesgos en lo que son las producciones científicas de las instituciones. Y hay una distancia todavía muy significativa entre lo que es el discurso, las normativas y la práctica, la puesta en práctica. Entonces hemos, en este proceso de construcción de esta agenda regional, hemos identificado que hay una necesidad muy grande de comprender lo que es la agenda de género plenamente, y las brechas que existen, y también el impacto del trabajo sesgado en lo que son las producciones científicas y tecnológicas. Existe una evidencia, y en el caso del primer webinar se va a abordar ese tema, sobre las mejoras y el impacto mayor que se tiene en investigación científica y en la innovación, cuando se incluyen perspectivas diversas, multidimensionales, incluyendo la de género. Entonces creamos esta agenda regional con el objetivo de fortalecer lo que las instituciones venían realizando a nivel país, para intentar realmente fortalecer todo lo que sea la reducción de brechas de género, entenderlas, comprender qué significan y poder transitar caminos para ir disminuyéndolas, así como también en el ámbito, como les decía, de lo que es la investigación y de desarrollo. Al final de la presentación de nuestra oradora principal, vamos a tener una pequeña presentación de lo que venimos haciendo y lo que venimos realizando y algunas de las acciones que estamos hoy teniendo en la agenda del PROCISUR. Este es el primer webinar del ciclo que les comentaba. El título es Integrar la dimensión de género en proyectos de investigación científica y tecnológica en la región. Tenemos el privilegio de contar como oradora principal con la profesora Londa Shivinger de la Universidad de Stanford, que dirige el proyecto Género Innovación, a quien agradecemos profundamente la predisposición para poder compartir la experiencia que ella tiene y sus conocimientos en esta temática que para nosotros resulta clave en el impacto en la investigación. Y bueno, ahora le voy a pasar la palabra a la licenciada Mariana Esteganini, que es especialista en temas de género, y nos viene acompañando en la agenda de PROCISUR desde los inicios, y ella va a estar moderando la reunión. Así que muchas gracias, bienvenidos a todos, y estamos convencidos de que va a ser una excelente charla que nos va a abrir muchísimo la cabeza y nos va a brindar oportunidades de reflexión interna para empezar a producir cambios más profundos. Gracias, Mariana.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Cecilia. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que están conectadas. Antes de iniciar, recuerdo dos cuestiones técnicas. Por un lado, para las personas que se han inscrito, que están conectadas por Zoom, este evento cuenta con traducción simultánea al portugués y al español, por lo cual tienen que cliquear debajo hacia la derecha en el icono del globo terráqueo donde dice interpretación para seleccionar el idioma de preferencia. También decirles que estamos transmitiendo en el canal de YouTube del PROCISUR, que en ambos, tanto aquí en el Zoom como en el canal de YouTube, les pedimos que se vayan presentándose, contando de dónde están conectados, en este evento que tiene un alcance que superó ampliamente al Cono Sur, porque tenemos presencia de varios países de nuestra América Latina. También pedirles que allí en el chat, tanto YouTube como aquí, vuelquen las preguntas para la profesora Shivinga, para poder conversar con ella en unos minutos. Bueno, contamos en este webinar con participantes de los países que integran el PROCISUR, por supuesto, Argentina, Brasil, Chile, Paraguay y Uruguay, además del ICA, el Instituto Interamericano de Cooperación para la Agricultura en Costa Rica, pero también tenemos participantes de otros países de América Latina y del Caribe, México, Colombia, Guatemala, Ecuador, Honduras, Perú, Bolivia. Hoy nos acompañan institutos de tecnología agropecuaria, también centros de investigación, secretarías, ministerios de ciencia y de agricultura. De ellos están participando investigadores, investigadoras, personal de las áreas de recursos humanos, especialistas en cooperación técnica y también personas encargadas o que forman parte de las áreas de género de estos institutos. También hay docentes, hay profesionales de asistencia técnica y administrativa. Digamos que si bien el público mayormente es público dedicado a la investigación, las diversas actividades y cargos de las personas que se han inscrito, bueno, nos revela un interés muy genuino y también muy diverso sobre la temática de este webinar. Bueno, paso a presentar a la doctora Londa Shivinga, que es profesora de Historia de la Ciencia en el Departamento de Historia de la Universidad de Stanford y directora del proyecto global de innovaciones de género en Ciencia, Salud y Medicina, Ingeniería y Medio Ambiente. Entre el año 2004 y 2010, Londa se desempeñó como directora del Instituto Kleinman para la Investigación de Género de Stanford. Es miembro de la Academia Estadounidense de Artes y Ciencias. La profesora Shivinga se ha doctorado en la Universidad de Harvard en el año 1984 y es una autoridad internacional líder en género y en ciencia. Durante los últimos 30 años su trabajo se ha dedicado a desentrañar este rompecabezas de género y ciencia a través de la historia de la participación de las mujeres en la ciencia, el género en la estructura de las instituciones científicas y la determinación de género del conocimiento humano. Varias personas de las que estamos aquí seguramente hemos estudiado y aprendido con sus libros y escuchándola en sus conferencias. Profesora Londa Shivinga, es un verdadero honor y un privilegio para el PROCISUR contar con su presencia hoy. La escuchamos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for that kind introduction. So today, you can see my slides, yes? Yes, okay. Today I want to explore with you gendered innovations. I launched Gendered Innovations in 2009. The methods and materials have been produced through a large international collaboration involving the European Commission, the US National Science Foundation, and Stanford University. And we've now expanded around the world, especially into South Africa, South Korea, and Japan. Institutes for gendered innovation research were opened in Korea in 2015 and in Japan in 2022. Gendered Innovations has brought together over 220 basic scientists, engineers, and gender experts in a series of collaborative workshops. New policies have been implemented across the European Union, Canada, and the US, and we also work with companies in Silicon Valley, industry leaders such as Apple, Google, and the like. So innovation is about integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into the design of research. The operative question is, how can we harness the creative power of sex, gender, and intersectional analysis for discovery? Does this approach add valuable dimensions to research? Does it take research in new directions? So I'm very excited about your initiative for integrating gender perspectives as strategic opportunities in agricultural research institutes. And in my talk today, I will discuss a number of examples of how gender analysis enhances science and point to the methods that we have available on our Gendered Innovations website. And I'm sorry that I don't have strong examples in agriculture. I would very much invite a collaboration with your researchers to create a case study for agriculture on the Gendered Innovations website. We have one labeled agriculture, but it's really about fishing. So I will be covering some of the methods and insights for embedding gender innovation into agricultural innovations from that particular case study. So first, a bit of background. Let's get this right. Governments and universities in the US and Western Europe have taken 3 strategic approaches to gender equality over the past several decades. The first is Fix the Numbers, which focuses on increasing the number of women and underrepresented groups in science. This is about participation. It's about creating gender balance in research teams. It's about hiring more women and underrepresented people at universities. And for agriculture, I might imagine that Indigenous people may have insights to share and that research teams might profit from their engagement. So the second strategic approach is Fix the Institutions. This promotes gender equality in careers through structural change in research organizations. This is about reforming universities and research institutions so that everyone's career can flourish. Now, much has been done on structural change in the US and in Europe. And I found this recent publication from the European Commission. Perhaps you already have it. So this is overcoming the challenge of structural change in research organizations. This means that the culture of the institution meets the new participants, and they aren't fit into the old culture of the institution. And then in the US, we also find that dual career couples are an issue. In 2008, I led a national US study with policy recommendations for universities, and both of these publications are freely available on the web. Now, the third strategic approach is Fix the Knowledge, or gendered innovations. And this stimulates excellence in science and technology by integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into research. So my short talk today will focus on this third strategic approach, fixing the knowledge. And for fixing the knowledge, I recommend our nature perspective as a good overview. So we distinguish these 3 fixes analytically, but in reality, they work together. Although many people try to fix the numbers first, we academics will not fix the numbers unless we also fix the knowledge. So let me give you 2 quick examples of the link between who does science and what science is created. So the first paper is about medical research. This is where a lot of research in gendered innovations was done at the beginning. So using a sample of 1.5 million medical research papers, our study found a link between women's authorship and the likelihood of the study to include sex and gender analysis. Now, this should not be so. It should not be that women researchers do more sex and gender analysis, because sex and gender analysis is about excellence in research. Everyone needs to be doing this kind of research, but nonetheless, this is what we found. So we find that, So I can't see your audience really here today, and I wonder if it's a majority of women. Whenever we talk about gender, often our audiences are a majority of women. So we need to make sure that everyone has the skills to integrate sex and gender analysis into research, because, as I said, it creates excellence in research. Now, in a second study done by Rem Koenig at Harvard's Business School, this study shows that if all biomedical patents filed between 1976 and 2010 had been produced equally by men and women, there would be some 6,500 more female-focused biomedical innovations. So here we see that the fact that women are left out of research, that there are barriers in the institutions, we see that we are not getting all the innovations that we could have. Now, why might all of this be relevant to your research? Why should you include sex, gender, and intersectional analysis in your research? Maybe you collaborate with European researchers. Beginning in 2020, and this is really important, the European Commission's Horizon Europe strengthened their gender dimension in research. Applicants are now required to integrate sex, gender, and/or intersectional analysis into the design of research, or to justify that it's not relevant. Now, this type of research isn't always relevant. Take physics. Black holes, you would not be analyzing gender in black holes in theoretical physics, but in almost all fields of science, sex, gender, and intersectional analysis are relevant. So the European Commission requires it if you want public funding. So the idea is, and this is important, the idea is that if taxpayer money is to be used, research should benefit all people across the whole of society. So I don't know if your research organizations in the Southern Cone have such policies. To provide the intellectual foundations for the European Commission's policy, the EC held a 2-year expert group, which I directed. This group consisted of 25 experts from numerous fields of science, from biomedicine, marine science, to machine learning and environmental sciences, and our results are published here. This book is easy to find and downloadable. It's free, and many of the case studies are on our website. Okay, now that I've set the stage, let's dive into some of the sex, gender, and intersectional analysis in research. I see your group is interested in the 4th industrial revolution, that is to say, the digital revolution. So I take my examples from AI and machine learning. So this is to show how this kind of analysis can bring innovation. So take search engines. If we look at Google search, and let's say you're searching for jobs, in the search results that appear, men are 5 times more likely than women to be offered ads for high-paying jobs. So why is that? It has to do with the data and the search algorithm. So men in the US, on average, all men, not broken down by ethnicity or where they live or educational background, all men, on average, are paid 20% more than women in the US still, I have to say. We've been working on this forever. So this is, as I said, it's an average of all men and all women. The algorithm here has been designed to get the ad to the right person. In this case, an ad for a high-paying job would go to a man. But we see that this perpetuates the cycle of social inequalities. Now, once the Google engineers became aware of the problem, they went about fixing it. Now, a second issue, and this is in health science. So we have, so this is health technology. So we see that soap dispensers don't work for people with darker skin. There's a very funny video on the internet that shows a man with white hands putting his hand under the soap dispenser and he gets soap. And a man with darker hands puts his hands under the soap dispenser and does not get any soap. White hands soap, darker hands no soap. And now, why is that? Again, it has to do with the technology. The near infrared technology to see the hand, close the circuit, and dispense the soap does not work for darker skin. Now, more seriously, we found during the pandemic that pulse oximeters, which have the same technology, don't work for darker skinned people. And the pulse oximeter, which measures the oxygen level in your blood, is the first line of defense in the emergency rooms when you come in with COVID. So this put people with darker skin at risk for serious conditions. And if you aren't getting supplemental oxygen when you need it, you can have organ failure. Now, another example, one of my favorites, in and this is computer vision. Computer vision is the technology that when you type in the word cat, you get pictures of a cat. It's very simple, computer vision. So here we see a photograph of a traditional US bride dressed in white over here. And this image is correctly labeled bride, dress, woman, wedding. So if you put in those words, bride, dress, woman, wedding, you would get a picture like this. But the photograph of this beautiful North Indian bride is mislabeled in the database as performance art, red, costume. So if you put in the word bride, you would not get this beautiful bride. So why is this? Again, it has to do with the data. The computer vision, so ImageNet is a huge data set with 14 million labeled images, and it runs a lot of our computer vision. And in this data set, we discovered that 45% of the data comes from the US, even though we're only 4% of the world's population. So we are represented 10 times over. But if you take China and India together in this data set, they only represent 3% of the images here, even though these countries represent 36% of the world's population. So we need data sets that are appropriate for geodiversity. Now, each of these examples is important. Each of these examples is important, but what did you notice about each one? Each example focuses on only one social dimension in isolation, either gender with Google search or skin tone with the soap dispensers. And here we want to focus on a higher level problem, and that's what we call intersectionality. So what is intersectionality and what is an intersectional approach? So intersectionality describes overlapping and intersecting forms of discrimination related to gender, to disabilities, to ethnicity, sexuality. The list can go on, socioeconomic status, geographic location. The term was coined in 1989 by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw to describe how multiple forms of discrimination intersect specifically for her in Black women's lives. In 1989, her concern was that the white feminist movement was excluding women of color. Now, let me show you how this works in research on facial recognition. Now, facial recognition, you open your phone, and if it's a smartphone, it can open by just seeing your face, or your computer might open by just seeing your face. This is facial recognition. So this work was done by Joy Buolamwini and is called Gender Shades. So Gender Shades studies intersectionality, specifically how gender and race intersect, and showed that facial recognition could not see Black women's faces. Now, interesting, Joy Buolamwini was the researcher doing this work, and her own program could not see her face, so she became very interested in this research. So here we have the gender analysis. This is one dimension. Systems perform better on men's faces than women's faces in facial recognition. Then we have another dimension, race analysis. So systems perform better on lighter skin than darker skin overall. But then when we do an intersectional analysis, we see that the system performed worse for Black women the error rate was 35% for darker skinned women. So 1/3 of the time, the program could not see women with darker skin. The performance was a bit better with a 12% error rate for darker skinned men, 7% error rate for lighter skinned women, and less than 1% for lighter skinned men, because they were the ones who developed the program and used themselves as the example. So they trained it on their own lighter skin. But there's more for facial recognition. Sexuality analysis shows that systems may not recognize transgender faces, especially during transition periods. And we can do one more gender analysis. If you are wearing makeup, facial cosmetics can reduce the accuracy of facial recognition up to 76%. And this is important because a lot of the international borders now use facial recognition for you to pass in and out of countries. So make sure you wear the same makeup you did in your passport photo. So here we have the intersectional innovation. So I want to go into this innovation some. So Bulamwini and Gebru, who found this bias, created a more inclusive data set to fix the problem. And they included the faces from men and women with lighter and darker skin. They chose members of parliament from 6 countries because members of parliament are public faces and can be shown. So they had 3 from Africa and 3 from Europe. But what problem do you see in this more inclusive data set? So my students saw it immediately. There are no Asians or indigenous people from the Americas or from Australia. And we don't know if any non-binary people are imaged. So we still need innovations to make such technologies work for everyone. But this particular innovation increased the accuracy hugely, and many companies adopted Bulamwini's new data set. Now, let me add, facial recognition is really a problem. Getting the data right and making technology see everyone is one aspect of the problem of facial recognition, but there are larger issues of security. Transgender people, for example, may not want to be tracked by facial recognition systems at all. And the potential misuse of facial recognition has led to several actions. Belgium, for example, has declared the use of facial recognition illegal across the country. France and Sweden have banned its use in schools, and the city of San Francisco has banned its use by public authorities. And this is mostly because it misidentifies people with darker skin. And so the police are often identifying a criminal as a man with darker skin, and it turns out the system was just wrong. So this is why we have some of these bans. Now, we at Gendered Innovation released a tool for intersectionality, and this is our intersectional design cards. So I'm happy to say that our cards won a prize in the UK last year, and we defined 12 factors. So the cards are for research teams as they start their work. They're really kind of for product designers, but can be used for anyone. And we defined these 12 factors, thinking that they're the basic factors that people need to take into consideration for innovation and discovery. These are factors that have often been left out, people who are not designed for or are left out of research. So this includes age, disabilities, educational background, ethnicity, family configuration. Is it a single head of household, single woman head of household? What is the family like? And these other factors. Now, Apple also released its intersectional list of factors, and they went for many more than we did. Some of these, I think, would be hard to know. What are people's philosophical beliefs? But anyway, these are important. This is what they design around. So if you have an iPhone, it's been designed around these factors. I find some of these very interesting, like handedness. My neighbor, so the Stanford faculty live on campus, and my neighbor happens to be a world-class hand surgeon, but she is left-handed. and surgical instruments have been made for right-handed people. So just think how much more amazing she might be if the instruments had met her needs rather than she, the surgeon, having to meet the needs of these right-handed instruments. And we also know when we have robots, they'll be doing handover tasks, which will require the technology to understand handedness. Now, both of these sets of factors were developed in a US context. So Europeans tell me all the time that they can't include race, for example. After World War II, European governments stopped collecting data by race because of the Nazi regimes, but there's still racism in the society. So I would think they need to consider it. And also, we all do research for a global audience. So we need to understand these factors globally. So that's the first point. These factors will differ by culture, and you need to choose the factors that are relevant for the Southern Cone, for your particular societies. A second point to make is that each research team needs to choose the factors most relevant to their research. You can't consider all of these factors. These are things you might think about as you begin, and then through your preliminary research, you cut it down to the most important things, like maybe gender, maybe, I don't know, disabilities, maybe geographic location, whatever it might be. But you obviously can't do all the factors. You need to choose what to focus on, but you should not rely on an unconscious default when you're choosing factors. You need to make conscious decisions. Okay, now I'm moving on to another example. This is close to my last example here. And this is climate change. And my example comes from marine science. So far I've focused on humans, but we need to also focus on marine organisms. So I recently had a Marie Curie postdoc from the European Commission working with me at Stanford Marine's station. And we've just published a review of sex analysis in marine organisms. Now, marine organisms, we think of male and female, non-binary, intersex, but marine organisms are really interesting. I even left male and female off the list, but they have all of these types of sex: simultaneous hermaphrodites, sequential hermaphrodites, proandric hermaphrodites. They start as male and then switch to female, and so on and so forth. So very interesting evolutionarily. I think it outshines humans here, I think. So now I have to say that in English, we use the term intersex for humans, whereas for plants and animals, we still use the term hermaphrodite, just to make that clear for non-native speakers of English. Now, global warming is hurting marine organisms, and this is a concern for all of us today. It means that our fisheries are in trouble. And importantly, whether we're talking here about fish or mollusks or crustaceans or any of the marine organisms, it's important to know that only 4% of the studies of these creatures have looked at sex, have analyzed sex. So there's really, this is a missed opportunity. There's much more we can do in this realm. So why is this important? For species reliant on temperature for sex determination, such as turtles, rapid global warming poses a risk to sex ratios and stability of populations. As you probably know, the sex of a turtle, you learned this in grade school, the sex of a turtle depends on the temperature. If the climate is warmer, you get a female, and if the climate is cooler, you get a male. An important study found that turtle sex ratio responds dramatically to global warming. So in Australia, the study was in Australia, and they found that turtles born in the warmer part of the Great Barrier Reef became 99% female. This is not right. While in the cooler parts of the Great Barrier Reef, the sex ratio of turtles remained a more natural 68% female. Such changes in sex balance can lead to population collapse. If the population is 99% female, it's hard for it to reproduce. So we could do many, many of these examples for marine organisms. The major point is that analyzing sex-based responses to climate change enables better modeling of demographic change among marine organisms and downstream impacts on humans. Effective ocean management and mitigation of climate change impacts depends on understanding organism and ecosystem responses to anthropogenic and environmental change. And then I just want to add, we've just started a new method for environmental work, and that is that we want to make this all intersectional by looking at how humans impact oceans and how then we eat the fish and how oceans bring us food insecurity when populations collapse. So we want to look at a more holistic, and I would say intersectional analysis for environmental work. So anyway, there's a case study for that under sustainable fashion that you can look at. So designing sex and gender analysis into research is one crucial component contributing to world-class science and technology. Now, what I want to do is to go to the website quickly and show you some of the resources we have here for integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis in your research. So we have lots of methods, and one you will for sure want to look at is analyzing gender. And importantly, analyzing gender is just not one thing you do. It's not that you just use the same number of male and female mice or humans in your research study. You have to look at it through the entire research cycle. So when you're identifying the problem, what are the gender issues that have led you to a particular priority in your research? And we have some of the latest research here to help guide you with that. Then when you're designing the research, what are the gender aspects you need to consider? And again, we have all the major points here, well, not all of them, but some, and then the literature is down here that you can see. Then collecting data for gender equality, what do you need to consider when analyzing the data? What do you need to, so it goes through the whole research process. We do that as well for sex. And you see that it's our basic approach to insist that analyzing sex enhances all phases of the research. Now, I wanted to go, we do have one case study. We've labeled it agriculture because we really wanted to do one on agriculture, but really our example here is gill nets fishing in Bangladesh. But I think some of the points might be useful to you in your research as you try to integrate sex and gender analysis into agricultural research. So gender transformative approaches have been developed to address issues by fostering the critical examination of gender roles, gender norms, and gender relations in, say, agricultural research. And then recognizing the strength and positive norms that support equality. So you can look at these, and then I don't know if you know the project Género, but they have 3 more points that might be relevant to your research. Now, if I may, I want to just look for 1 second at policy recommendations, because I heard that some people in your audience are at agencies and doing policy work or at universities. So to really integrate gendered innovations, so gender perspectives into research, we need the science infrastructure to be supporting this. And there are 3 pillars of support for science and innovation. So funding agencies are very important, and I've already talked a little bit about those. funding agencies need to ask that sex, gender, and maybe intersectional analysis be included in the proposals before public funds are awarded to a project. We want to make sure that a research project benefits everyone across all of society. Peer-reviewed journals are really doing their part. They are now looking, they've adopted something called the Sager guidelines, and they've adopted sex and gender guidelines so that a manuscript is not considered excellent unless it answers the gender questions it must answer. So if you want to publish in some of the big name journals like Nature or the Lancet or Cell, some of these big journals, you need to do that. And then universities, we are really not doing our job. I can say that, I'm a university professor. We need to integrate sex and gender analysis throughout the curriculum so that students learn how to do it when they learn their other technical skills at university. And then for the funding agencies, I just want to show you, if one of your funding agencies in the Southern Cone wants to implement sex and gender analysis in their proposals throughout their agency, we have a 5-part plan that shows you how you might do that. So it's a policy roadmap. You click into each of these and you get the best practices for each of these particular aspects. So with that, I'm going to end my remarks, and I'm very happy to answer questions and to discuss with you any part of this that you would like to discuss.
Londa, muchísimas gracias por tan generosa exposición y tan detallada. Hay algunas preguntas que surgen, pero como punto de partida en relación a lo último que explicabas, ¿podrías darnos un poco más de detalle de cómo funciona operativamente los procesos para integrar este análisis? Estos métodos, ¿de qué manera se operativizan? ¿Hay conjuntos de investigadores que trabajan específicamente sobre esto? ¿Trabajan sobre estas guías que vos mencionabas? ¿Cómo se hace operativo esto que para nosotros en nuestra región es tan novedoso?
Okay, so you're talking about researchers, right? Not funding agencies. Okay, researchers. Okay. Well, this is exactly what we were doing with Gendered Innovations, was trying to make this operational. So I think you first have to start with the terms. So, you know, this is stuff people have to study. It's like any kind of research. It's a lifetime's work. It's something, as I say, it should be taught in undergraduate and graduate work at universities so that people know these things. Okay, so I think we start with gender. And so the definitions are important. So first we have to think about, what are the gender norms? Gender norms are those pressures in society, those spoken and unspoken rules that make men and women do what they do. We all conform to gender roles. We do what is expected of us as men or women. And this is where you find gender inequality, right? So these gender norms can be in the workplace, they can be in the family culture, like what did your parents expect you to be when you grew up, right? It can be in the institutional policy in state, national culture, any of these things. Let's see, how do I get back now? I have to get back. Oof, sorry. Okay, and then if we look, so that's gender norms. The second one is gender identity. This is then how people identify themselves. They might be, you know, masculine, feminine, non-binary, whatever that is. And this is when we press out against the gender norms and change society. And then there's gender relations, and this is the power relations between different genders. And this is how society works. So whenever you walk into a room, you do this quite unconsciously. You look at who is in the room and you size up what is the power dynamic here. When may I speak? When do I have to be quiet? When do I have to agree? When can I state my opinion? That sort of thing. So we have to be clear what the terms are. And this is what the definitions are about. Then we have the methods, and this is where we try to operationalize things. So first we have the method of rethinking research priorities and outcomes. This and you can click in here and you can get, you can get this text of what we're thinking when we're doing that. So we have, and this goes through the research process. First, how are you setting your research project? What are the priorities? What are the gender considerations there? What are the environmental considerations? What are the social considerations? Then rethinking concepts and theories. Concepts are interesting because some of them immediately exclude men or women. If we take the concept of osteoporosis, which is the disease that thins your bones as you get older, and then you might fall and break your hip, that concept leaves out men because osteoporosis is considered a female disease. So you have to think when you're using a concept, who does it privilege in society and who does it not privilege? And then we have formulating research questions, analyzing sex. I showed you the 5-part method where you would read all those articles and learn what that has to say. Then analyzing gender, then analyzing how sex and gender interact. This is really important. They aren't individual things, but they interact. If we think about humans, so humans are formed by society, but they're also formed by their physiology, by their genes and their sex hormones, and these interact to make us who we are as adults. And this is about lab research. So there's just a lot you need to do. And, it's something that you have to learn. There's not just a formula. It's particular, as researchers, that the methods are particular to your field and your questions. And so you have to learn this stuff about gender so that you can apply it to your research project. And it's not just one thing. I wish it were simple, but it's really very exciting. And I've spent my whole life doing it and also developing methodologies for it. So it's not, you need workshops. So my suggestion to you is that you have some workshops where I do these, but surely you have experts who can do this, who talk about what gender research is. So this would be about an 1.5-hour workshop. Talk about and give examples of how gender improves a research project. And then the researchers form groups where they will talk about how any of this relates to their research. And then after a coffee break, everyone comes back and the groups report out in a plenary session of what they discovered or how our new insight they have because they took sex and gender into account. So they haven't done the research yet, but they imagine it's a new question. And these groups will then compete with each other to have the best answer. And I think people begin to see, they feel, they understand a bit more. So you're going to have some workshops. You're going to people have to study this.
Gracias, Londa. En relación a lo último que ejemplificabas, es muy evidente en el área de la medicina, ¿no? En donde hay investigación que claramente afecta la salud de las mujeres por no haberlas tenido en cuenta. Eso está muy bien expresado en varios casos de estudio. Pero en relación a la agricultura, nos preguntan también algunos asistentes aquí y en YouTube, si existen desarrollos tecnológicos, más allá de los 2 casos que has comentado sobre las redes de Bangladesh, Bueno, si existen algún desarrollo tecnológico que conozcan, que haya impactado positivamente en la implementación del enfoque de género en la agricultura.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I have not studied that field. So this is what I would invite your group to work with us here at Gendered Innovations to find several really good examples that are eye-opening for people, that really show what a difference this makes.
Bien, y nos preguntan también desde YouTube, y era algo que veníamos conversando en el grupo de trabajo de género, qué rol, qué papel juegan desde su experiencia las instituciones y el estado de avance sobre el tratamiento de la temática de género en las instituciones. Si bien las tres dimensiones van en paralelo, eso lo entendemos, pero la experiencia en instituciones que han avanzado en el abordaje de la temática, en la capacitación, en la sensibilización, en normativas institucionales, ¿cuánto de eso incide, si es que incide, en después incorporar la perspectiva de género a el diseño de proyectos y programas?
Yes, so we have a really new, important development in the United States, and this has to do with artificial intelligence, which is, so I'm going to use that as an example. You would need to do it for agriculture, but let me tell you about this. So artificial intelligence is very dangerous, right? And the people who develop these technologies don't pay attention to the social impact. So the computer science departments at Harvard University and Stanford University and other places, I know a university in Germany, in Munich, have done this. What they do is that they bring in, the professors have decided that it is important to teach collaboratively with a social scientist. So they teach the technical skills for developing algorithms, and they teach at the same time the social impacts that these algorithms might have. So the computer science professor couldn't do it alone. That professor needed the help of a social scientist. So they've changed their teaching model to be these two types of professors teaching together. And not only that, our National Academy of Engineering, so I imagine you have a National Academy of Agricultural Research. So our National Academy of Engineering said, yes, this is extremely important. So at the highest level of research, they're saying, yes, we must look at the social impact at the same time that we develop the technical skills. So this would be the type of thing you might develop for agriculture, to teach students how to consider gender issues at the same time that they're learning about soils and that they're learning about, irrigation and these sorts of things. So that really is the kind of program you need to implement. Now, we also, I want to say in the US, we also have something called gender studies. It's a separate program, and they teach all gender stuff, but not related to any of the sciences. So that's kind of helpful, but not as helpful as actually getting into the agricultural sciences and teaching from inside.
Nosotros hemos conversado en varias ocasiones en un plan de formación que hicimos el año pasado para unos casi 60 referentes de género de los institutos sobre algunas cuestiones vinculadas a esto en proyectos desde el diseño de maquinaria agrícola que está diseñada para que las maneje un hombre por su tamaño y sus dimensiones, hasta proyectos en donde hay un ejemplo en uno de los países de la región, en donde se desarrolló un frijol con muchísimos beneficios nutricionales. Fue un proyecto de 2 años de investigación, pensado en que fuera un aporte a los sectores más vulnerables de la población, y resulta que eso después en la práctica no se adoptó, porque tardaba el doble de tiempo en cocinarse. Entonces no se tuvo en cuenta la situación de la mujer que se ocupaba de esas tareas y su uso de sus tiempos y las tareas de cuidado. El ámbito de la ruralidad está terriblemente masculinizado y las tareas de cuidados en la ruralidad son aún mayores de lo que sucede en el ámbito urbano. Entonces hay ahí mucho para trabajar, entendemos nosotros desde nuestro grupo de trabajo, hay mucho por hacer para comprender esto, no solo en los proyectos de investigación digamos, biológicos, ¿no? Sino también y sobre todo de desarrollo rural, de arraigo territorial, hay muchísimo por hacer. Esperamos poder avanzar juntos en alguno de estas ideas y de estos proyectos, pero sin dudas que esta idea de talleres es muy valiosa y la tomamos. Londa, aparece aquí en el chat sobre las brechas de género en la matriculación universitaria vinculada a las áreas de ciencia y de tecnología, y bueno, un poco esto de los estereotipos, ¿no? Dicen cómo superar la influencia de la familia en las mujeres a la hora de elegir la carrera. Es una pregunta que hacen desde Paraguay, en donde hay una cuestión generacional en donde esto no se ve, y también implica, esto lo sumo yo, indudablemente una brecha de ingresos alta, porque son las carreras mejor pagas, y también un potencial retroceso en la igualdad ganada, porque son las carreras que van ganando mucho terreno en el futuro también en el sector agropecuario. ¿Alguna reflexión, Londa, en relación a esto?
Well, this is the structural change booklet that I was showing you, right? Getting rid of the stereotypes. And so I used to study all that stuff, but I've now just focused on the knowledge because that's the piece that needed more work on it. But as you said, these all work together, right? So the machinery, you gave the wonderful example of the machinery that is too big and heavy and whatever for women to use easily. It was based on stereotypes, and it reinforces stereotypes. So we have to see these reinforcing mechanisms all the time. Yeah, I think we've done a lot. So I like your example of the agricultural machinery, for instance, because that's really easy to fix. People understand this problem. Like, because with car design, we've been working on it forever with car design. So it would just be, machinery. So that could be, something, an easy kind of win for you. But so, I mean, all of this implies a huge process of social change, which to support any of this. So I really think that the best approach is university courses that study this. So in the gender studies programs at universities, do you have gender studies in your universities? Programs that just focus on gender studies across all fields? Literature and art and history and so on?
No podría generalizar porque somos varios países, pero no es lo más frecuente la transversalización de esa mirada en la totalidad de las carreras, ¿no? Más bien son cortes verticales o aislados, no es lo más frecuente, es uno de los, comentarios que íbamos a hacerle, porque es algo que también sucede, no aparece como algo transversal común, falta formación en los profesionales y las profesionales vinculados a género, no tienen herramientas.
Yeah, so I think there are really two things here. There are the general gender studies courses that, that it's for literature and art and history and engineering and agriculture. It's for any field, but they're the people who talk about stereotypes and who talk about the big social change that needs to go on. So that's one aspect, is universities would do very well to have gender studies programs. So you have professors who are experts in that, who teach these things. And then the second piece is what I was describing about the computer science in the US, which you could do with agricultural sciences, bringing together the technical person and the gender expert to teach together. So that's really two different approaches, but I think both are needed. Because if you have the gender studies, it increases the knowledge of how gender works in a society for all college graduates. You could do it in high school. You know, it would be for everyone who graduates.
Perfecto, clarísimo. Lo último, Londa, porque sabemos que tienes agenda comprometida a continuación, pero aparece una pregunta más que tiene que ver con esta cuestión de financiamiento que mencionaste. Como para entender bien esto, en muchos de los institutos, en la elaboración de los proyectos, ya estamos viendo claramente que uno de los requisitos para obtener financiamiento es incluir la perspectiva de género. Lo que sucede es que a veces ese requisito es insuficiente en términos de integrar efectivamente esa dimensión de género, porque solamente con decir, bueno, participó tanta cantidad de mujeres, como que eso alcanzara para decir que el proyecto tuvo perspectiva de género. ¿Hay otra dimensión o hay otra, podemos ampliar un poquito esto en términos de los requisitos de financiación? ¿Y qué es lo que se puede pedir más o que se puede presentar más para demostrar esto?
Okay, so I really recommend that you look at, for funding, I really recommend that you look at this policy framework. So if you want to have, so we did a paper, where's our paper? We did a paper in Science. It's here, you can see it here. So I went to policy, major funding agencies. So we have a science paper here, but this is an elaboration of what funding agencies need to do. So they want to ask about gender in proposals. They can't just ask that question. They first have to define the terms. And then we have all the definitions, the best practices from funding agencies around the world in definitions of terms, like defining gender. Then we have proposals for guidelines for applicants. So they need instructions. Are you going to encourage this or require this? You give examples, but you can click in here and see them all. Then there's instructions for evaluators. This is usually the problem. You ask for gender in your proposal, but the evaluators have not been trained at university to know what that means. So this is instructions for evaluators. And then here's the training for applicants, evaluators, and the funder staff. And then, of course, every funder needs to evaluate their policy implementation. We find this is the weakest part that people have. So you can learn a lot about how a funder would do this by going through. So for instance, training, each one of these you can click and find, you know, so the European Commission has two trainings. These are booklets. The German Science Foundation has a few little trainings here. NSERC in Canada has trainings. So you can see what is available here and use those. But for agriculture, you would have to develop trainings yourself, because that is new territory. I'm telling you, we really need this. So I'm very anxious to work with you to find something very cool. We don't have many connections. Gendered Innovations doesn't have many connections in Latin America, and I would like to have more because it's important.
Muchísimas gracias, Londa. Estamos recibiendo comentarios muy alentadores y de mucha gratitud, muy interesante, una capacitación reveladora, muy buenas repercusiones de esta conversación tan generosa que hemos mantenido de tu parte. Bueno, la verdad es que hay mucho por hacer, esa sería una clara conclusión, está todo por hacer. Esperemos poder transitar este camino juntos. Desde el PROCISUR hay una convicción de que la cooperación internacional es clave para fortalecer estas estrategias y sobre todo darle sostenibilidad en el tiempo, así que en ese camino estamos y en ese camino esperamos seguir, poder empezar a transitarlo juntos en alguno los proyectos Londa y a todos y todas las personas que vienen trabajando en esta área. Agradecemos muy especialmente la participación y el compromiso con esto. Bueno, desde no tenemos más preguntas, así que más que comentarios, así que Londa, la invitamos a quedarse, por supuesto, pero
I cannot.
ya sabemos. Después vamos a compartirles a todos los inscriptos la página de Gender Innovations, el link al video de este webinar para que puedan revisarlo y seguir compartiendo la información, que es muchísima, así que muchas gracias, ha sido un honor para nosotros. Ahora voy a tomarme, no sé si querés agregar algo, pero ahora voy a tomarme unos minutitos de...
Solo desde PROCISUR Londa seguimos en contacto. Acá hay varios países también que han manifestado el interés por participar, por poder insertarse en los estudios con Stanford, así que haremos los contactos pertinentes a futuro. Muchísimas gracias, muy excelente la presentación, muy clarificadora. Chao.
Bye bye.
Bye, bye.
Gracias, Londa. Bueno, me quedo...
Perdón, Mariana, solo comento porque vi ahí un mensaje de Agrosavia y demás. Después vemos en todo caso cómo seguir canalizando algunas de las inquietudes. Claramente desde PROCISUR vamos a intentar continuar con esta agenda con la Universidad de Stanford, que creo que lo positivo que nos mostró Londa es que existen herramientas para mejorar esto, que hay un claro déficit en el sector agrícola y que, como también manifiestan, es un sector sumamente masculinizado, entonces es más que importante también empezar a ver cómo vamos insertando, con qué herramientas podemos ir, hasta podemos contribuir para la mejora de los materiales que la propia Universidad de Stanford genera, así que creo que podemos ir canalizando, así que solo comentar eso, que estamos leyendo los comentarios y que vamos a después ir viendo cómo podemos darle continuidad a las temáticas.
Gracias Cecilia, y también en línea con esto, tomamos unos minutos de este espacio para compartir con ustedes, muchos ya lo saben porque son parte del grupo de trabajo del PROCISUR, pero otros no, entonces otros institutos, digamos, que nos están acompañando no, entonces bueno, queremos compartir con ustedes una breve reseña de nuestra historia, de lo que venimos trabajando y de lo que de lo que tenemos en la gatera, digamos, para sacar en breve y compartir con todos ustedes y con todas ustedes. Bueno, el PROCISUR tiene un grupo de trabajo de género en instituciones de ciencia, innovación, tecnología, bueno, e investigación. En el año 2021 es nuestro punto de partida como grupo, en donde las personas referentes de género de los INIA y del ICA, que forman parte del PROCISUR, se juntaron a plantear, bueno, qué agenda de trabajo conjunta, cooperativa en la región podía generarse, y ahí es donde se conforma este grupo de trabajo que busca, por un lado, fortalecer agendas de los institutos que ya venían trabajando en esto, pero también abordar con más fuerza estos intentos de institucionalizar la perspectiva de género, integrando esta dimensión de género desde el momento cero de los proyectos. Algo común que sucedía con un nivel bastante generalizado, en un porcentaje importante, era esto de plantear que solamente con obtener una cantidad de mujeres participando en una reunión o en una capacitación alcanzaba para, digamos, se venía con esa concepción. Entonces, bueno, se avanzó y se generó un documento base que hoy Londa mencionó y ella ha tomado conocimiento de él. Ese documento está disponible en la página del PROCISUR, en donde se sienta un poco la posición de este grupo de trabajo y de la cooperación en relación a esta temática para el Cono Sur. A partir de eso, uno de los principales diagnósticos fue que claramente necesitábamos más personas formadas en género, en planificación estratégica con enfoque de género, y en lo que implicaba la institucionalización del enfoque de género, Se hizo una capacitación que duró 3 meses el año pasado, fue una capacitación cerrada a los INIA y al ICA, en donde se fortaleció mucho esta idea de la planificación estratégica y de la integración de esta dimensión, teniendo también un diagnóstico de otras cuestiones vinculadas a las brechas de género, desde la violencia estructural hasta los estereotipos, el acceso de las mujeres a los puestos científicos, a la jerarquía, al liderazgo, pero en donde fue muy claro algunas cuestiones que nos permitieron trazar una hoja de ruta vinculada a la cuestión de género para este espacio. Y así, este año, en marzo de este año, el Consejo Directivo del PROCISUR aprobó 4 líneas temáticas de trabajo que se pusieron en marcha luego de esa aprobación, una de las cuales tiene que ver con el fortalecimiento de este espacio. Está próxima a salir una publicación del PROCISUR visada por todo este grupo de trabajo sobre género en instituciones de ciencia, tecnología e innovación en la región. También estamos terminando de armar una página web dentro del espacio de web del PROCISUR, dedicada específicamente a la temática de género. La segunda línea de trabajo está pensada para, estamos en la instancia de relevar información, pero hemos trabajado con un grupo de cada uno de los INIA y del ICA en la elaboración de dimensiones y definición de indicadores comunes a todos los institutos. Es todo un desafío porque hay mucha diversidad de país y también hay diversidad de instituciones, en donde podamos escoger algunos elementos en común que nos permitan año a año ir midiéndonos, ir viendo cómo estamos en relación a algunas cuestiones que hacen a la reducción de brechas de género, y poder medir y presentar, y por lo tanto también trazar agendas y darles continuidad a agendas institucionales vinculadas a la temática de género en los INIA del Cono Sur. Es un desafío grande porque estamos creando una herramienta nueva con un enfoque muy particular, que son los institutos de ciencia y tecnología agropecuaria, pero bueno, estamos muy entusiasmadas y entusiasmados en el grupo de trabajo con este proyecto, y estamos ya en la instancia de relevar información para llegar a presentar estos primeros e incipientes resultados antes de fin de año. Por otro lado, estamos trabajando en el armado de una guía metodológica muy simple, esto que conversábamos con Londa sobre el que ninguna ingeniera o ingeniero, médico veterinario o economista tienen por qué saber cómo integrar la perspectiva de género. Aún sabiendo de género, aún teniendo la máxima voluntad, resulta complejo cuando no está en la formación de base esto. Entonces, bueno, estamos trabajando en una guía simple, metodológica, de paso a paso, que ayude a integrar esta mirada de género, esta dimensión desde la recolección de información, el diseño, la ejecución y la evaluación de proyectos, para poder dar un salto mayor a esta idea de que solamente con un equipo que tenga un 50% de mujeres estamos bien, o que si tenemos mitad y mitad en las personas que recibieron una capacitación estamos bien. Bueno, eso no significa claramente que estemos reduciendo las brechas, ni que estemos dejando de reproducir algunos sesgos y estereotipos. Entonces, bueno, estamos trabajando en eso también. Y la cuarta línea, de la que estamos siendo parte en este webinar, es una línea de sensibilización y capacitación. Creemos que en estos temas falta mucho, y ha quedado después de esta charla en evidencia, que falta mucho por decir, falta mucho por hacer, y falta mucho sobre todo por conversar, y poner en diálogo, en conversación y en debate sobre estas cuestiones de género vinculadas específicamente a la ciencia y tecnología y a la innovación en la región, y vinculadas específicamente al sector agropecuario. Hay mucho por hacer y por conversar para poder construir definiciones comunes que tengan un carácter regional, porque hay muchas herramientas. Londa mostró muchísimas desde Stanford y mostró también muchas desde Horizonte Europa, de la Unión Europea. Hay muchas en el mundo, pero creemos firmemente que debemos construir herramientas propias que tengan un carácter regional fuerte, respeten las identidades, la diversidad de nuestros países y sobre todo el carácter y la trascendencia que tiene la producción agroalimentaria y agroindustrial en nuestra región para el desarrollo de nuestras naciones. Así que, bueno, dejamos ahí el correo electrónico de la Secretaría Ejecutiva del PROCISUR, la página web del PROCISUR. Prontamente verán allí en la sección del grupo de trabajo de género, y quedamos a disposición para cualquier conversación, como decía Cecilia recién, y por supuesto agradecer nuevamente la participación de todos y de todas, tanto las personas que trabajan en el grupo de trabajo de género como quienes se han sumado a esta idea. También quiero agradecer a Bárbara, a Daniela, a Ana, a Helen que han hecho la traducción, y a todo el equipo técnico del ICA que nos ha dado mucho apoyo. El documento en la página está dentro de las líneas de fortalecimiento institucional, hay una que es de género, estoy bien, Ceci, y ahí está el documento. No sé si...
Institucional, una de las líneas de PROCISUR, desarrollo institucional, ahí está el tema género, y ahí está el documento base. No, y bueno, una cosa que también está bueno resaltar ahora al final, al cierre, es que vamos a continuar con este ciclo, este fue el primero, así que seguramente les estaremos invitando a los que ya se han inscrito en este primero, les mandaremos sobre el segundo, y el tercero que esperemos concretarlos en breve, también trabajando un poco los temas incluso de liderazgo de mujeres, que también es un tema que, más allá de lo que vos manifestabas, Mariana, de que las mujeres están ocupando quizás algunos cargos o que se contabiliza si son jefas o no jefas, bueno, el tema de cómo ser líder como mujer también es algo interesante que creemos que también se necesita capacitar en este sector.
Y lamento no haberlo comentado, lo había notado, pero no llegamos a tiempo a comentárselo a Londa, pero el 85% de las personas que están asistiendo a este webinar son mujeres. Y es algo que, como dijo bien Londa, y creemos también, necesitamos más participación de todas las personas que integran las instituciones. Hay mujeres muy machistas, hay hombres muy feministas silenciosos, también los necesitamos en estos espacios para trabajar y transformar la realidad de las instituciones internamente y también hacia la producción científica y tecnológica. Muchísimas gracias. Gracias a todas las personas que han saludado, participado, preguntado, asistido. Vamos a enviarles por correo electrónico a quienes estaban inscritos todos estos detalles que comentamos hoy.
Muchas gracias y esperamos encontrarlos en el próximo webinar y quizás también después que tengamos la web, más participación incluso de otras instituciones de fuera de la región y de algunas personas que ya vi que se incorporaron de los INIAF que son nuevos en el grupo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.